Welcome to our week one lecture in sport admin on the history of college athletics. This will be just kind of a foundational lecture that you need to understand. Really whether you want to work in college athletics or not. So, guys, really things haven't really changed as much as you would like to think over over 100 years of college athletics. There's still this battle of what role athletics plays in a college or university. What's the relationship between athletics and academics? And it's starting to get even more convoluted, more clouded with this idea of looking to pay players. And so, colleges, particularly college leadership like presidents, they're challenged to figure out ways to attract people to their student body to meet their enrollment needs. And, at a school like a Reinhardt, that athletics is vital because it is what helps drive enrollment. That's how we get people at a school. At a place like a Georgia, they're looking at athletics as a way to build their brand. And when they do have successful, seasons, then they're able to be able to take advantage of that and have, to have an uptick in enrollment. This has led to this issue of what is higher education supposed to be for? This term country club college has come in where it's kind of reached a boiling point with a lot of faculty members and people in the community of, where they see it as not an investment in education anymore, but an investment in building these really nice athletic facilities and dorms and complexes that maybe don't add to the mission of higher education. It's also always been a battle over who is eligible, how to keep them eligible, how to keep players out of trouble. One thing that athletics has helped is it has increased female student population on campuses. It's also helped to make campuses more racially diverse. So, you're looking at kind of sport going into the 19th century. Prior to the Civil War, football wasn't really a thing. It was there were other sports that were much more popular and much more high profile than football. And you had this kind of struggle that happened where, universities and really society in general was trying to come up with, what's a model for intercollegiate athletics? How does it fit in? And you had this kind of two-pronged type of approach. And understand that early on, there were males were almost exclusively the only ones who are allowed to play sports. So you ended up having this kind of a competition between a model where you're playing team sports and competing to win, with a model, with this gymnastics collegiate model where it was focusing on exercise, on getting into shape, on being physically fit. And so you got to understand that most of the building blocks of higher education, building blocks of athletics started in the Northeast. And it kind of grew there before it moved out to other parts of the country. And so the question started to arise of, well, how do we deal with these new sports? Who's going to run them? Who's going to keep people from cheating? And that's where eventually we ran into the NCAA. Initially formed in 1906, and it was formed not necessarily because it wanted to figure out how to run college athletics, but more because of safety. In 1904, there were 21 deaths and over 200 serious injuries just in football. And it got to the point where people were, paying teams to come play with people who weren't even enrolled in their school. And so colleges started to fear that maybe they were losing the amateurism, and so the NCAA comes around, and one of the first struggles the NCAA came up with was the idea of how to deal with full ride scholarships. And what happened basically is you had a lot of schools that were able to offer full rides, and others couldn't. And so it ended up to be where it wasn't equal. And so the NCAA basically issued an executive order or regulation in conjunction with the Sanity Code. And what basically the Sanity Code said was that financial aid for athletics should be required to be need-based, meaning that the people getting it had to demonstrate a financial need. And so, it kind of led to the model that we kind of see today where, 1957, the NCAA permitted colleges, universities to pay for athletes to have room, board, tuition, and fees. So, big time college sports obviously now have always been a form of entertainment. And so in 1951, the NCAA took over the national control of football contracts. We got to understand that's a huge deal. As you start to look in your first assignments, you're going to figure out that, universities make the majority of their money on their media deals. And so the NCAA could kind of dictate who was on TV, who wasn't on TV, where the money got. So in 1984, the University of Oklahoma and Georgia filed a lawsuit against the NCAA and won the lawsuit, which eventually has led to this rollout and this evolution of big-time college football contracts. NBC and Notre Dame, and then all of the conferences have their own TV networks. So there's always been an issue of, and it's always been a fight over who should be included or excluded in college football. And there's been a couple of kind of landmark lawsuits. So the Notre Dame versus the Ku Klux Klan, what this was that, Notre Dame is a Catholic university and it's really a university built on immigrant families. And that university at the time, being in Indiana, was in a place where there was a major influx of Ku Klux Klan members. And so they kind of went to not war, but a struggle over who they were going to let play at Notre Dame. And that's where the name Fighting Irish came from. It came to represent the fight of allowing people of color and people of elite or people of immigrant status or immigrants to this country to be able to compete. Obviously, the Carlisle Indians, which is a Carlisle school in Pennsylvania where Jim Thorpe, who arguably the greatest athlete in American history, Native American Indians competed. And then you had a kind of rise of HBCUs, or historically black colleges and universities. And so there was a resistance to recruit African American players by all white teams. So most of them moved to the north. This is where you had the powerhouse programs. Ohio State, were built on that. Obviously, in our own states, you had a struggle over 1956 where Georgia Tech didn't want to allow, where the governor of Georgia didn't want Georgia Tech to be able to play the University of Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh had an African-American player. This was in the Sugar Bowl. And the high point of HBCUs was around 1968 or so, where they had 11 players drafted into the NFL from Jackson State alone. As major college football became segregated, then you started to have the talent of the HBCUs started to be kind of drained away and spread out amongst other universities. Just like with people of color, women have had a struggle in college sport. The first battle was really the battle to be able to participate, period. Again, it was looked at as more women should participate in physical activity, not in competitive games. 1924, you had the first women's division, National Amateur Athletic Federation, which still stressed enjoyment, not an emphasis on competition. 1957, you had a division of girls and women's sports that kind of started to acknowledge that you needed high-skilled female athletes. 1967, you had the Commission of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, which eventually led into the push for Title IX, which passed in 1972. By 1980, the NCAA kind of took over from the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, and basically led to men's and women's athletic departments combining, which really hurt women administrators. What you have to understand is that while Title IX did wonders for participation of female athletics, it killed women in administrative leadership positions and women coaches, because those women's coaching jobs became more high level and more prestigious, and so men started to apply. So while it helped participation of athletes, it hurt participation it hurt having women administrators. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I look forward to working with y'all.